Just want to make a plug here. Nerd Night is only as good as the people who present. Lawrence just went to our Facebook page and sent us a Facebook message and was like, "Hey, I want to present on. Has anyone ever presented on the Tour de France? Would that be okay?" And we were like, "Yeah." So if you're interested in doing a 20-slide, 20 seconds each presentation, looking kind of famous in Phnom Penh, getting some free beers, either come talk to me after, talk to Tim sitting at the table with the slide deck, or get our Facebook page, send us a message, email us at nerdnightpnomphen@gmail.com. Usually speaking, a nerd night is a good idea. Sometimes it's a questionable idea. So I'm very excited to present this next speaker, who tripped on acid on Saturday and decided to make a nerd night presentation about that. And actually, I was really touched because going into it, yeah, come on up. So without further ado, can we have a big round of applause for Micah Stanowski talking to you about acid.
Just a quick correction, it was actually my second time doing this. Anyways, I'm going to talk to you about LSD. I'm not an expert, I'm just some dude who eats drugs sometimes and likes it usually. This is the chemical structure of acid. I don't know what it means or how to interpret it. I just thought it made me look more knowledgeable. So how I ended up doing this, getting into this, was basically a good joke. I wanted to do acid, I wanted to do another nerd night, and then a friend suggested, why don't you do a nerd night presentation on the acid trip you're going to take? Which was funny, but it turns out it's an incredibly difficult thing to actually talk about, and when you say you're going to do a presentation on acid, everyone assumes you're just some jackass. So there's no good way to do it. I imagine I could either narrate my trip to you, which is sort of not communicable and probably boring, or I could tell you what Wikipedia would say, which is a waste of everyone's time, or I could advertise to you that you should do acid, and you don't really need that from me. I think all of these are hopeless, and I'm just going to do all three. So the beginning of my narration, it was me with two friends and sort of a shitty plan, which was drop acid and go to Silk Island, just across the river, and we took a bag, or some bags with us. We had food, we had cards, drew pictures, I had a toothbrush. At first, you just sort of, this is again the narration of my trip, you just sort of get real high, you giggle, you laugh, you get euphoric. That part really I find pretty boring. I tire of it and I really look forward to the sort of more introspective focused. This is my first drawing, and you might look at this and think this guy's on acid, or you might look at this and think this guy sucks at drawing. Both were true at this point. I think the acid has absolutely no effect on my ability to draw. I was into lips and hands at the moment, and I was talking about my pens. This one, I was drawing a hand, and I thought this one was really cool, but it turns out I was just on acid. I traced my hand, and I was wondering why my hand had points on it, and so I was trying to figure it out with my hand, but it turns out I'm just such a shitty artist that I can't trace well. But this next one is pretty ingenious. This shows a lot about acid. So we made a business plan, which was if you bought a lot of drugs in bulk, you could parcel them out into smaller amounts of drugs and sell them to people and make money off of that. And with that money, we could buy dumplings, which is what we wanted to eat. The problem with this business plan was that if you have drugs and money and dumplings, you don't want anything else and your business falls apart. This was me really high, trying to prove that I was still like rational and a functioning human being, so I made a very simple representation of the square crackers we were eating with sugar crystals on them. This is a square puff. It's pretty boring, but this next picture, it gets into some real heavy shit here. So here we have my representational drawing of a square puff, plus the square puff I was representing, with the square puff drawn on the square puff. I've taken a picture of a square puff with the square puff drawn on it next to the square puff. This is the most self-referential and inspired piece of art. You don't get inspiration like this without drugs. And it gets more serious after this. I got tired of the laughter, like I said, and so we left our little safe spot. And it was sort of alienated. I didn't really want to interact with people. I wanted this sort of internal thing. I quit talking and we started wandering, wandering and letting the world just sort of make an impression on me and just sort of seeing what happens. And it turned into this crazy rainstorm, which just sort of embraced my need for receptivity, because it was just so overbearing. The clouds came and the rain, it was loud, and there was just no room for me to exert myself. And I just sort of had to receive whatever was coming. The rain's whipping the grass around, and there were a bunch of bees hiding from the rain. It's very cool. And being in that receptive mode made me very aware of sort of my general and of the world around me. And so after the rain disappeared, there were all of these beautiful colors, and the sun came down, it was shining on the palm trees, and there were cows eating grass, and it was just sort of like looking on a fresh world. It was very beautiful. And then after that, I sort of began the slow reintegration process into being a normal person, where you start analyzing, you start discussing, you start interpreting things, and there are certain difficulties. It was hard to get back into that. I had a hard time expressing myself after that. And now we're getting into why acid is interesting to me. So humans are pretty ingenious. We make stuff all the time. We're always inventing things. A lot of our inventions, for the most part, I think mediate our experience. So we experience the world through our inventions. And a lot of our inventions have unintended consequences. An example is like a spear is probably really good for killing animals, but it also turns out to be really good for killing humans. LSD, taking those qualities into account, LSD is a really interesting human drug because it's totally derived, created by humans. Basically, its hallucinogenic effects were discovered by accident, but rather than most other human inventions, it engenders an immediacy of experience, a very personal experience. LSD research in America was first started with secretive CIA funding during the Cold War that was intended to find out about mind control and manipulation techniques to use against the Soviets and to protect American citizens against Soviet influence. But that experience itself had unintended consequences in that it gave all of these just sort of like test subjects these really expansive, very personal experiences. So guys like Timothy Leary, Ken Kesey, you can ask me about them later, had these totally crazy experiences and decided to start these big cultural like movements around it that really worked against what the CIA was trying to do. The unfortunate part of that is that out of those movements, we get this really weird, like typified, generic, hackneyed idea or image of what being on acid is like, which is totally not true to my experience. It's very generic in the sort of depictions we have, but in my experience it's very personal, very precise, and very immediate. Anyways, that is it. I would encourage you, if you're interested, to do your own research, either like Wikipedia or drop acid and see what happens.
All right, thank you, Micah. Where did you get it from?
An Australian friend who brought it from Australia. Not here anymore.
It's gone. Yeah, sorry. We're not here to sell you drugs at Nerd Night, unfortunately.
I brought a toothbrush because in life in general, and then also on drugs, a toothbrush is like one thing that you can do to like maintain order, and it's very simple. And like if shit's falling apart, you can brush your teeth, and then there's like a little bit of control. And so if everything's going down the hole, you can just brush your teeth, and it's cool.
Follow-up question: Did you have this realization about toothbrushes before or after you were on acid?
I had this realization about toothbrushes like the first time I had a bad experience with weed like 10 years ago.
All right, cool. Any other questions? Yeah.
In your extensive research, Micah, have you come across anything about acid use in Asian populations?
Have you come across anything about acid use in Asian populations in your extensive acid research, Micah?
I mean, I guess you could say that I was in an Asian population while doing acid, and that's about as extensive as my research gets. No, I have no idea. However, hallucinogens, especially in like Indian traditions of sort of, I guess, religions, have a very long history in shamanic practices and things. So a similar strain, but not exactly the same.
Oh, that's a deal. That's a deal. Okay, guys. All right. Yes, Commerce at Nerd Night. All right. Round of applause for Micah.